There is something you never tell anyone, yet it follows you every single day. That exact moment when you know what you should do, and still you do the opposite. That split second when you feel the impulse, recognize the temptation, hear the inner voice warning you, and even knowing the cost, you give in. Not because you are weak, not because you don't want to improve, but because, deep down, your mind is still an ungoverned territory. That is the truth that hurts to admit. You don't fail from lack of strength, you fail from lack of mastery. And if you're here listening to this, it's because you're tired of feeling like you're not in control of your own life. Tired of promising yourself that tomorrow you will, that this time you will, that now you will, only to watch the same pattern repeat itself again and again. Tired of feeling your body act before your reason. Tired of feeling your impulses drag you to places you don't want to go. Tired of disappointing yourself in silence so you don't have to explain anything to anyone. Tired of losing battles that were never meant to be this difficult. You're not lacking discipline. You're not lacking motivation. You're not lacking strength. What you're lacking is training. But no one ever told you that. No one taught you that self-control doesn't appear through inspiration, but through practice. No one taught you that you're not broken, you're disorganized. No one taught you that the feeling of not being able to control your impulses isn't a moral flaw, but the result of a mind that was never trained to obey. No one taught you that every impulse has an origin, a structure, a language, a way of operating, and that if you understand it, you can master it. That's why this episode isn't motivation. It's surgery. We're going to open the mind where sabotage happens. We're going to expose every mechanism that has controlled you until today. We're going to dismantle, one by one, the patterns that steal your strength. And we're going to rebuild you from the ground up. But first, I want you to remember something. Self-control is not the ability to resist, it's the ability to choose. And choosing demands two things almost no one practices: presence and awareness. Most of the time, you don't fail because you want to fail. You fail because you're not even present when the battle happens. Inertia moves you. Habit moves you. Impulse moves you. And then, when everything has already happened, guilt appears, frustration appears, the question appears, why did I do it again? And here comes the answer you were never given, because it was never really you who acted. It was your ungoverned mind. It was your accumulated impulses. It was a version of you that has not yet been educated. But that version is not your destiny. It's your starting point. Imagine for a moment that you could experience your life feeling that you are the one in charge. That when an impulse appears, you can observe it without obeying it. That when temptation shows up, you have the ability to delay action until clarity returns. That when intense emotion rises, it doesn't drag you. It simply passes before you like a cloud you don't need to chase. Imagine feeling that your inner word carries weight. That when you tell yourself no, it's no. And when you tell yourself yes, it's yes. That is the power of self-control. That is the power of the Stoic. That is the power you're going to learn to build today. And you're not listening to this episode by accident. You arrived here because a part of you knows you cannot keep living trapped in the version of yourself that reacts on autopilot. Because a part of you is tired of losing strength in small decisions that accumulate into big defeats. Because within you, there is a voice that is beginning to awaken and is telling you, I don't want to continue like this. I don't want to be dominated by what I feel. I don't want to be a slave to my impulses. That voice is what brought you here. That voice is the one we're going to strengthen. That voice is the one you will recognize as your true self by the end of this episode. Today, we're not going to talk about willpower because willpower is unstable. Today, we're not going to talk about motivation because motivation fades. Today we're going to talk about structure, about mechanisms, about practices, about concrete steps. We're going to talk about how to train your mind so it stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. We're going to talk about how to turn inner chaos into order, impulse into pause, reaction into decision. And here comes the most important part. Self-control is not something you get. It's something you build. And you build it through repetition, intention, and clarity. That's why today, you're going to receive 12 Stoic steps, simple but profound, that will reconfigure your ability to govern yourself. They are not metaphors. They are not pretty phrases. They are actions, daily practices, specific instructions designed to shape your character from the inside out. And if you follow them, you won't just change your behavior, you'll change your identity. Because the truth is this: when you regain self-control, you regain your life. When you regain your life, you regain your power. And when you regain your power, no one, not even you, can sabotage you again. So listen carefully. This is not an episode you simply hear. It's an episode you train, an episode you practice, an episode that transforms you while you listen. Today marks the beginning of the most important internal battle of your life. And for the first time, you are not entering unarmed. Welcome. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving in the comments. Starting today, I take back control of myself. That sentence will serve as a reminder of what we're truly training here. Not muscles, not temporary motivation, but the mastery of your own mind. Because no one can make you lose control without your permission. And today you decide to stop giving it away. Today you draw the line between living by reaction or living by choice. This is the moment to prove to yourself that you deserve clarity, inner strength, and a life led by your reason, not by your impulses. Without further delay, let's begin. First Stoic step: learn to distinguish impulse from decision. There is a moment so small you almost never notice it, where your entire life shifts without you realizing it. It's that invisible second between what you feel and what you do. That inner flicker where an impulse rises and you, without thinking, jump, react, give in, let yourself be pulled. For years you've lived believing you're the one making choices, but if you look with absolute honesty, you'll see that most of your actions aren't born from reason, they're born from impulse. Replying to a message you shouldn't answer, eating what you swore you'd avoid, saying what you should have held back, abandoning what you promised to start, getting distracted when you vowed to stay focused. And today, right here, we're going to dismantle that illusion. Because nothing steals more freedom from you than confusing an impulse with a decision. The Stoics understood that impulse is not an enemy, but it's not a guide either. Impulse is simply the automatic reaction of a mind that hasn't been trained yet. It's an almost biological movement, an echo of the past, a reflection of what you've done 1,000 times before. That's why it feels so natural, so immediate, so convincing. But when you act from impulse, you live on autopilot. And living on autopilot is living asleep. A life directed by impulses is a life governed by inner noise, by unfiltered emotion, by urgency without awareness. And you're here because you know you no longer want that version of yourself, the version that reacts without thinking, sabotages itself without meaning to, and feels like it loses control every time the impulse outruns your reason. To develop self-control the Stoic way, the first step is not to fight the impulse, nor suppress it, nor shame yourself for feeling it. The key is to delay action, open space, allow attention to enter. When you delay an impulse for just a few seconds, the mind lights up, awareness steps in, and something appears that didn't exist before: the capacity to choose. That tiny delay is a silent miracle. It's the simplest act and, at the same time, the most revolutionary act of your life, because in that second you create between feeling and acting, you take back your freedom. I want you to imagine a simple, everyday scenario. Someone speaks to you in a tone that hurts. Your impulse may be to respond sharply, defend yourself, attack, justify, raise your voice. That's the automatic reflex conditioned by past experiences, old fears, wounds you haven't fully healed. But if right there, when the emotion rises inside you, you don't act but simply breathe and observe, something changes. You're no longer an animal reacting, you're a human being choosing. The emotion doesn't disappear, but it loses authority, and you take back the reins. Self-control begins exactly there, not when you're calm, but when the storm is already inside you. And this is where most people fail, not because they're weak, but because they never learned how to stop the impulse before it becomes action. We live in a culture that glorifies spontaneity, that says, be authentic, do what you feel, as if every emotion were a trustworthy compass, but it isn't. Impulse is not authenticity, it's habit. It's emotional memory disguised as truth. And every habit that weakens you must be questioned, not obeyed. The Stoics insisted that true freedom is mastery over yourself, not over others. You can conquer cities, make money, earn admiration from thousands, but if impulse governs your life, you're still a slave. A slave to your anger, your fear, your anxiety, your thirst for immediate gratification, your constant need to escape yourself. That's why the first step is so fundamental. If you don't learn to differentiate impulse from decision, it doesn't matter how many steps follow, you will always return to the same spot. But how do you actually do it? How do you separate impulse from decision when everything inside you feels fused together? Start here. Every time you feel urgency, any urgency to respond, eat, buy, argue, check your phone, walk away, quit, rush. Repeat this phrase in your mind. This is an impulse, not an order. That phrase gives you the power back. It forces you to see yourself from the outside, like someone watching a wave approach while knowing the wave doesn't define them. You're not the wave, you're the shoreline. Identifying the impulse means acknowledging it exists, and acknowledging it weakens it. You don't need to eliminate impulses, you need to illuminate the moment they appear. Because what is seen stops controlling you. What is recognized stops ruling you. A person without self-control believes they are their impulse. I'm just like this. I can't help it. I always react like that. That's how I am when I get angry. But none of that is true. That's the narrative of a wounded ego, not the reality of your potential. The impulse is not you. It's only the first sound before the real music begins. Once you recognize the impulse, the crucial step comes next. Delay the action. You don't need to delay minutes or hours, just a few seconds, 3, 5, 10. The pause is your sword. The pause is your shield. The pause is the tool that turns your life from impulsive to intentional. And it doesn't matter how many times you fail, at first every attempt strengthens the muscle of choice. Every pause, no matter how small, is a victory, because every pause proves you are not a slave to your reaction. When you delay action, the emotion softens just a little, and that little bit is enough to see clearly. Suddenly, what felt urgent stops being urgent. What seemed necessary reveals itself as unnecessary. What appeared irresistible becomes manageable. What felt inevitable turns into a choice. This is what the Stoics called regaining the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the ability to choose with reason rather than impulse. Now I want you to visualize a moment in the past when you lost control, a moment when you acted without thinking. Maybe it was a message sent in anger, a rushed decision, an impulsive purchase. a harsh comment, an action you regretted later. Go back mentally to that moment. Observe it. Ask yourself, what would have happened if I had paused for just 5 seconds? Your life would be different. Your relationships would be different. Your path would be different. That is the power of the first step. It's not small. It's not symbolic. It's transformational. Because when you master one impulse, you learn to master many. When you delay one reaction, you strengthen all your future decisions. When you stop obeying automatically, you discover freedom where there used to be only habit. And that freedom becomes the foundation of your self-control. It's like building muscle. At first it shakes, it's hard, it hurts a little. But with each repetition, you grow stronger. And the day comes when what once dominated you no longer has power over you. This is the first step, because without it, all the others collapse. You can't say no without impulse control. You can't build discipline without impulse control. You can't choose who you want to become without impulse control. That's why today, right here, I ask you to practice something both simple and profound. Whenever you feel urgency, delay the action, not to repress yourself, not to deny yourself, but to observe, to choose, to govern yourself. That is the heart of self-control, the ability to create space within yourself. Where there is space, there is clarity. Where there is clarity, there is decision. And where there is decision, there is freedom. And that freedom, the freedom to not be a slave to your impulse, is the beginning of your transformation. Second Stoic step: name what you feel before you act. There is a silent force inside you that controls you far more than you admit. The emotion you don't recognize. That emotion that rises like a quick fire, settles behind your chest, shifts your tone, your posture, your breathing, and without asking for permission, takes command of your decisions. The most dangerous thing about an emotion is not feeling it. It's not seeing it. Because what you don't see governs you, but what you acknowledge loses power. This is the art of the second step. Naming what you feel before you act, giving identity to the inner hurricane so it stops dragging you like an object without will. The Stoics discovered something that modern neuroscience now confirms. When you name an emotion, your brain changes mode. It stops reacting and starts processing. It's as if you turned on a light in a dark room. It doesn't eliminate the mess, but it keeps you from tripping over everything. And if you think about it, many of your mistakes were born exactly from this, acting without understanding what you were feeling. You got angry without knowing you were hurt. You gave in without knowing you were scared. You argued without knowing you were insecure. You overate without knowing you were anxious. You pulled away without knowing you were sad. Every one of those moments had the same origin, an emotion left unnamed. Naming what you feel is not cheap therapy or emotional poetry. It is strategy. It is mastery. It is self-government. When you say, "I'm irritated," you're not justifying your reaction, you're separating yourself from it. When you say, "I feel anxious," you're not surrendering, you're observing the enemy from the outside. That small, almost invisible act breaks the emotional spell. Without a name, an emotion is a dictator. With a name, it becomes just a visitor. And you can decide what to do with a visitor, but you can't decide anything against a tyrant you don't even know is there. Think about this. How many times did you act believing you were being logical, when in reality you were being impulsive? How many times did you tell yourself, "It's nothing," while your hands shook, your stomach tightened, or your chest felt heavy? The body always speaks before the mind, but you learned to ignore it so you wouldn't have to face the truth. And so you accumulated a life full of decisions made not by your reason, but by your wounds. Naming what you feel is your first act of emotional courage. It's looking at yourself without excuses, without disguises, without masks. The Stoics were never trying to silence emotions. They were trying to understand them. Marcus Aurelius wrote down his feelings in the morning to dismantle their power. Seneca described his anger to shrink it to its real proportions. Epictetus taught his students to identify the initial impression before acting, because he knew that what destroys you is never the emotion itself, but your automatic obedience to it. So, when I invite you to name what you feel, I'm not asking you to be weak or vulnerable. I'm asking you to be sovereign. Imagine a real scene. You receive an unexpected message, one that triggers that inner jolt you know too well. Your impulse is to respond immediately, to defend yourself, attack, justify, protect. But right there, before you move a finger, you place a pause and say, even if only mentally, I'm upset, or I'm anxious, or I'm activated. Instantly, the fire drops a degree. It doesn't vanish, but now you're not inside the fire, you're observing it. That tiny shift is monumental. A person who observes their emotion is one step away from controlling it. A person who doesn't is condemned to repeat their past. There are emotions you've carried so long that you've mistaken them for your identity. Anxiety you confused with, this is just who I am. Impatience you confused with, my personality. Jealousy you confused with, that's how I love. Anger you confused with my nature. But when you dare to name what you sat in present place, feel, you discover something that can change your life. You are not your emotion. You are the one who observes it. And the observer always has more power than the observed. Naming what you feel also protects you from making decisions from a wounded place. Sometimes you're not tired, you're disappointed. Sometimes you're not angry, you're scared. Sometimes you're not distant, you're ashamed. But because you never say it, not to others and not to yourself, you act from a misunderstood emotion, and everything collapses without you knowing why. Self-control is not about forcing yourself, it's about knowing yourself. And no one can control themselves if they don't even know what they're feeling. Think of it this way. Every emotion you don't name becomes a wolf in the dark. You don't know where it is, what it wants, or when it will attack. But when you name it, you shine a flashlight on it. You see it, you understand it, you reduce it to its real size. It's no longer a giant monster. It becomes something manageable, something external, something that is not you. This step is especially powerful in the moments when self-control feels impossible. When you're about to give in, when the impulse screams, when temptation pulls, when you're moments away from breaking a promise you made days, weeks, or years ago, that is the moment when you must say, quietly, silently, or in your mind, I feel temptation. And by naming it, temptation loses its invisibility cloak. It becomes concrete, visible, limited. It's no longer you with your strength against an abstract giant. It's you observing a temporary phenomenon. Because everything passes, every emotion, no matter how intense, has a cycle. And when you name it, you accelerate its ending. You may ask, but what do I gain by naming it? You gain the right to choose. You gain space. You gain clarity. You gain freedom. Without a name, the emotion acts for you. With a name, you act despite the emotion. And that difference is exactly what separates an impulsive man from a disciplined one. The Stoics trained this daily. At dawn, they observed their inner state. Before bed, they reviewed the emotions of the day. When anger appeared, they named it. When fear touched them, they acknowledged it. When desire pulled them towards something they knew wasn't good for them, they recognized it. They didn't deny it. They didn't push it away. They didn't pretend to be strong. True strength is not ignoring what you feel, it's facing it without trembling. Emotional ignorance is not courage, it's hidden weakness. Naming what you feel also prepares you for the steps ahead, because self-control is not built through brute force. You're not a soldier fighting your emotions, you're a strategist studying them. A general who doesn't know his enemy loses the war. A man who doesn't know his emotions loses every daily battle. In food, discipline, conversations, routines, and his relationship with himself. Start practicing this today. Each time an emotion appears, don't run, don't act, don't defend yourself. Simply say, I feel anger, I feel fear, I feel desire, I feel anxiety, I feel sadness, and stay there a few seconds. That's all. You don't need to do anything else, because that small act trains you for the greater act, choosing from reason, not from emotion. This second step may seem simple, but it is one of the deepest in Stoic self-control, because it forces you to enter a territory you've avoided your whole life, your inner world. It turns you into a witness of yourself. It makes you honest, grounded, present, and above all, it gives you back command of your life, because you cannot control what you ignore. You cannot transform what you refuse to see, and you cannot change a life you don't even recognize. Naming what you feel is the beginning of your inner victory. The battle is not won by eliminating emotions, but by understanding their language. And once you understand that language, it no longer dominates you, it informs you, sharpens you, strengthens you. Your transformation begins here, by looking directly at what used to control you without your awareness. Third Stoic step. Eliminate the illusion of urgency. There is something that has stolen more peace from you than your failures, more time than your distractions, and more energy than your worst habits. The feeling that everything is urgent. That inner push that makes you believe you must respond now, decide now, act now, fix everything now. That subtle nervous tension that tightens your chest, shortens your breath, and forces you to live as if the world were going to collapse unless you move this very second. That is the trap. Not the world's trap, your mind's trap. The Stoics knew this. Most human suffering is born from haste. The haste to react before thinking, the haste to speak before listening, the haste to decide before understanding, the haste to move before feeling. And that haste walks around disguised as urgency. But listen carefully. Almost nothing is as urgent as your mind makes you believe. Urgency is a mirage, an internal construction that pulls you away from self-control and drags you toward chaos. Have you noticed how you change the moment you feel you can't wait? Your voice speeds up. Your breathing becomes shallow, your mind narrows, your judgment fogs. And without realizing it, you're no longer making decisions. You're running from the emptiness that appears the moment you slow down. That is exactly what urgency does to you. It prevents you from seeing, from thinking, from feeling, from choosing. And you think you are being decisive, when in reality, you're being dragged. The illusion of urgency is the impulse's best ally. Break that illusion, and the impulse loses oxygen. Stop even for a few seconds, and the impulse collapses. Because an impulse needs speed to survive. It needs you to act before your reason wakes up. It needs you not to think, not to observe, not to question. It needs you to behave like a soldier obeying orders without awareness. But when you slow down, when you breathe, when you do the opposite of what the impulse demands, you begin to see the truth. Nothing was urgent. You were. Most of your worst decisions were born from that self-fabricated internal emergency. You bought things you didn't need because you had to take the chance. You replied angrily because it had to be said right then. You ate something you later regretted because it was now or never. You gave in to temptations because you couldn't wait. And so you surrendered your freedom to an invisible enemy, emotional haste. But the Stoics discovered a secret weapon, an almost divine power inside you that very few people ever use. The conscious pause. A pause is not stopping your life. It is stopping your autopilot. It is an act of sovereignty. It is the moment you reclaim your ability to choose. And here is the key. If it can wait, it must wait. That is the golden rule. That is the technique that separates the impulsive from the self-governed. When you feel the urge to act now, ask yourself, what would happen if I wait 1 minute? What would happen if I breathe for 10 seconds before responding? What would happen if I watch the emotion before moving? What would happen is simple. Your life would change. Urgency is a thief that feeds on your unconsciousness. A 10-second pause is enough to destroy its power. That pause is not weakness. It is strategy. It is emotional intelligence in its purest form. It is the precise moment you begin to act from your center, not from your storm. Think about it. How many times, after reacting impulsively, did you say, I should have waited? How many times did you regret acting in the heat of the moment? How many times did haste push you to say things you didn't mean, sign things you didn't want, accept things you didn't desire, send messages you should have never sent? Every one of those emotional scars was born from the same place, the illusion of urgency. But when you start breaking that illusion, something extraordinary happens. Your inner world expands. You begin to see angles you couldn't see before, nuances that were invisible, paths you didn't know existed. Haste locked you into one scenario, calm reveals 10. Urgency made you a slave, stillness makes you a strategist. The Stoics trained this daily. They didn't wait for a crisis to practice it. They trained it in the mundane, in eating, speaking, moving, choosing. They slowed down what others did without thinking. They walked with intention. They responded with intention. They decided with intention. Not because they were slow, but because they owned their inner time. They understood what you are just beginning to discover. The one who controls the speed controls the battle. Your inner enemy wants speed because it knows you are weak there. Your reason wants calm because it knows you are invincible there. And here is where this step becomes transformative. When you eliminate the illusion of urgency, you begin to see what truly matters and what was just emotional noise. You discover that 90% of your urgent feelings were simply anxiety in disguise, that your "I must do this now" was a fear of facing your own thinking, that your "I can't wait" was an escape from looking within. And when you see that, you reclaim a power you thought you'd lost, the power to act from your center, not from your chaos. Practice this starting today. Every time something pressures you, pause. Every time an emotion pushes you, breathe. Every time a decision feels urgent, question it. Every time life accelerates you, slow down. Because self-control is not built by moving faster, it is built by moving better. And here is the final truth of this step, the truth most people avoid because it requires deep discipline. Your life doesn't need more speed, it needs more awareness. Urgency steals your control. The pause gives it back. This third step doesn't ask you for strength, it asks for courage. The courage to stop when everything inside you screams to rush. The courage not to obey your most intense emotion. The courage to look urgency in the eyes and say, "You don't rule here." That is the essence of Stoic self-control. Not eliminating your impulses, but preventing haste from turning them into decisions. Once you master this, your life stops being a constant reaction and becomes a conscious creation. Fourth Stoic step: reduce stimuli before demanding willpower. When we talk about self-control, Most people imagine a heroic act, resisting, holding on, clenching your teeth, fighting the impulse as if it were a powerful and visible enemy. But the Stoics had a different vision, more intelligent, more realistic, more human. They understood that true self-control does not begin at the moment of temptation, but long before it, in what you allow and what you unconsciously feed. Willpower is not built in the moment of the impulse. It is weakened or strengthened by the stimuli you choose to keep in your life. The mind is like soil. If you plant noise, chaos grows. If you plant silence, mastery grows. That is why this fourth step is so crucial. No one can control their life while living surrounded by elements that constantly push the mind toward distraction, anxiety, impulsiveness, and emotional exhaustion. Be brutally honest with yourself. How many times did you give in to an impulse, not because you were weak, but because you were overwhelmed? Overwhelmed by notifications, opinions, screens, to-dos, other people's expectations, emotional noise, and stimuli you never consciously chose but simply got used to. You did not fail for lack of strength. You failed because there was too much interference. The human mind was not designed to fight 100 battles a day. It was designed to see clearly when the environment is not constantly attacking it. The Stoics knew this well. The wise man does not test his virtue unnecessarily. He does not expose himself to disorder, expecting to emerge unscathed. He understands that discipline becomes easier when the path has fewer obstacles. So they reduced stimuli before asking their willpower to act with firmness. And that is the lesson you need to embrace today. It is not heroic to fight everything. It is intelligent to remove what drags you where you do not want to go. Look at your own patterns. Every time you face temptation, you are not responding from your best self. You are responding from your tired, accelerated, overstimulated self. When you are exhausted, you make worse decisions. When you're drowned in noise, you lose perspective. When you have too many choices, your mind collapses. And here is the brutal truth. Your environment is winning the battle before you even step into it. Willpower is not an infinite resource. It drains with every small decision you make throughout the day. And if you waste your mental energy on trivialities, by the time you actually need discipline, there is nothing left. That's why people who think they're undisciplined are often wrong. They didn't lack strength, they had too many stimuli. The Stoics trained something called environmental mastery. They knew that a mind living in disorder cannot govern itself with clarity. They understood that environment influences more than intention. A room full of distractions is the perfect breeding ground for chaos. A phone full of notifications is a trap. An overloaded mind becomes its own silent enemy. Seneca said that no man can call himself free if he is surrounded by things that enslave his attention. And today, more than ever, we are victims of an invisible war. Everyone wants your focus, your time, your curiosity, your impulses. Every app is designed to break your self-control. Every stimulus is designed to hook you. The question is not whether you are strong. The question is how much noise you've allowed to steal the strength you already had. Reducing stimuli is not escaping the world. It is creating conditions for your mind to act with power. It is choosing what deserves access to your nervous system. It is organizing your physical space to organize your mental space. It is removing visible temptations when you are not yet ready to face them. It is cleaning your phone not to be a better person, but to reclaim your mental authority. It is closing doors before they become problems. It is protecting your clarity like the treasure it is. When you reduce stimuli, your mind breathes. Your thoughts sharpen. Your willpower stops fighting unnecessary enemies and focuses on what actually matters. And suddenly, self-control stops feeling like a heroic act and starts feeling like a natural consequence. Ask yourself this essential question. What stimuli are sabotaging your life without you noticing? Screens, people, conversations, late-night habits, environments that pull you down, objects that trigger you, noise, chaotic routines. Identify them one by one. Be ruthless, not because you must eliminate them forever, but because before strengthening willpower, you must close the leaks through which it escapes. Self-control is not resistance, it is strategy. And strategy begins by clearing the terrain. Don't demand strength while you surround yourself with things designed to weaken you. Don't blame yourself for failing if your environment is programmed to make you fail. Once you reduce stimuli, something extraordinary happens. Making good decisions no longer feels like a burden, it feels natural. You no longer fight 10 distractions because only one remains. You no longer battle sudden impulses because you removed their triggers. You no longer need titanic willpower because you removed unnecessary weights. A clear mind becomes your ally, and self-control becomes a way of life, not an occasional victory. The fourth step is a quiet but profound invitation. Stop demanding willpower while drowning yourself in stimuli designed to destroy it. Reduce what drains you. Eliminate what scatters you. Clean what confuses you. Free yourself from what steals your energy before you even get to use it. If you do, you will discover something life-changing. You never lacked self-control. You lacked the space for self-control to exist. Now that you understand this, begin creating that space. Every stimulus you reduce is a victory. Every victory makes you stronger. And every ounce of strength brings you closer to the mastery you've been seeking your whole life. Fifth Stoic step: practice voluntary discomfort. Modern humans have built their lives around avoiding discomfort. We flee the cold with heating, the heat with air conditioning, silence with screens, loneliness with distractions, boredom with instant stimulation, effort with shortcuts, and deep thinking with constant noise. What we fail to see is the silent consequence of all this: a weakened mind, a fragile character, a will that collapses at the slightest challenge. The Stoics, however, understood something the modern world seems to have forgotten. Strength is born from conscious contact with discomfort, not from unnecessary suffering, not from martyrdom, but from the deliberate act of facing what your mind wants to avoid. Voluntary discomfort is not punishment, it is training. It is how you forge a spirit that does not fall apart when life actually gets hard. Think about this for a moment. Everything that has ever made you stronger came from discomfort. A conversation you didn't want to have, a change you didn't want to face, a loss you couldn't prevent, a boundary you had to set, a day when you kept going despite not feeling like it. Every real transformation happened right on that edge where your mind said, "I can't anymore." But your soul whispered, "Yes, you can." Discomfort is a door. Most people avoid it. The Stoic walks through it. Because the Stoic understands that what's on the other side is not pain, it's freedom. When you choose discomfort voluntarily, you send a clear message to your mind. I'm in charge, not you. And that message is the foundation of self-control. The problem is that constant comfort convinces you that life should be frictionless. It tells you everything should be easy, fast, pleasant, immediate. But that illusion steals something essential from you: your ability to endure, to persevere, to remain steady when life doesn't cooperate. Every time you avoid discomfort, your mind learns that it can dominate you. Every time you choose the easy way, your character weakens. Every time you postpone the difficult, your will shrinks. It's not about the action itself. It's about the signal you send. And soon, you find you can't wake up early. You can't train when you don't feel like it. You can't say no. You can't pause before reacting. You can't keep a promise to yourself. Not because you're weak, but because you've spent years training yourself to avoid discomfort. Voluntary discomfort reverses this process. It's not about seeking pain. It's about exposing yourself to the kind of friction that makes you more resilient, more awake, more self-governing. A cold shower is not heroic. It's a direct conversation with your mind saying, I can choose, even when I don't like it. Training when you're tired isn't about transforming your body. It's about reminding yourself that your discipline is stronger than your mood. Saying no when everything in you wants to please is not selfishness. It's integrity. Fasting for a few hours isn't a trend. It's reclaiming authority over your impulses. Getting up when comfort pulls you back into bed isn't torture. It's victory. Every small act of voluntary discomfort strengthens the most important muscle you have, your character. The Stoics practiced this constantly. Seneca slept on the floor some nights to remind himself he could live with less. Epictetus, once a slave, understood that true freedom doesn't come from external conditions, but from refusing to depend on internal comforts. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind to face adversity before it arrived, not out of pessimism, but to temper his spirit. For them, discomfort was an ally. They didn't expect life to be gentle. Life is not designed that way, but the mind can be designed to withstand it. And that resilience does not appear on its own, it is built. Think about your daily life. Where could you introduce small doses of voluntary discomfort? You don't need grand gestures, just subtle choices. Take the stairs more often. Walk when you can. Turn off your phone an hour before bed. Train even when it rains. Do the task you dislike instead of postponing it. Stay silent when the impulse wants you to speak. Give up, temporarily, something you know you use as an emotional crutch. Each of these actions is another brick in the construction of your inner strength. And the most powerful part? The benefit doesn't just occur in the moment it accumulates. Voluntary discomfort builds a kind of confidence no external achievement can give you. The confidence that you can act even when your mind protests. Here is the truth. You cannot control your life if you cannot control yourself. You cannot control your decisions if you cannot control your impulses. You cannot control your impulses if you never test them. Self-control is not built in extraordinary moments. It is built in ordinary moments where you consciously choose not to take the easy path. Voluntary discomfort is a silent but firm declaration. I choose to be uncomfortable today, so I am not destroyed tomorrow. And critique. Because the real purpose of this practice is not to get used to pain, it is to change your relationship with it. When you stop fearing discomfort, your mind stops using it to manipulate you. When you can face what hurts, you can face what matters. And that is the core of Stoic self-control. There is something deeper still. Voluntary discomfort reveals who you are when nothing is forcing you. Anyone can behave well when circumstances demand it. But when you choose discomfort without witnesses, without pressure, without necessity, your true character appears. You discover the distance between who you say you are and who you really are. And yes, sometimes that discovery hurts. But it is also the beginning of freedom, because once you see yourself clearly, you can guide yourself intentionally. Never forget this. Comfort is not the enemy, but it is a terrible teacher. It makes you believe life should adapt to you, when in reality, you must adapt to life. The Stoic embraces discomfort because he knows the world owes him nothing, not softness, not convenience, not ease. And when the storm comes, and it always comes, the difference between those who collapse and those who endure lies in what they practiced during calm times. Today, you decide what kind of person you will be when things get difficult. And that decision is not made with words. It is made with deliberate, uncomfortable actions. If you want to govern yourself, you must prove you can act even when you don't want to. If you want to transform, You must teach your mind that your will is above your comfort. If you want self-control, you must enter the territory where your character is tested. It is not easy. It was never meant to be. But it is simple. One gesture each day. Each gesture, a victory. Each victory, a stronger mind. And a strong mind is a free mind. Sixth Stoic step. Decide in advance how you will act. There is a silent truth most people discover far too late. No one makes good decisions while trapped in impulse. No agitated mind chooses clearly. No stirred heart thinks prudently. No overwhelmed person can sustain their best self. Self-control, therefore, is not built in the middle of the storm. It is built before the sky darkens. This is the principle the Stoics understood with almost supernatural clarity. The battle for your self-control is not won when you are about to fall. It is won hours, days, even weeks earlier, when you calmly define who you want to be in difficult moments. That is why this step is crucial. Deciding in advance means designing your behavior before emotion takes that privilege away from you. Imagine for a moment what happens when you don't decide ahead of time. Life pushes you. Impulses speak louder than your values. The emotion of the moment takes the wheel, and without realizing it, you end up acting from a place that does not represent who you truly are. You say things you never meant to say. You accept things that drain you. You postpone what makes you grow. Habits you promised to keep fall apart. You give in to pleasures that weaken your character. All because, when temptation, anger, fatigue, or fear finally appeared, you were already late. A decision not made beforehand is not truly a decision. You are merely reacting. And reacting means letting your inner enemy choose for you. The Stoic does not improvise. The Stoic prepares. The Stoic anticipates the internal battle. Marcus Aurelius began his days reminding himself of the difficulties he would face. Difficult people, injustices, opinions, unexpected problems. Not to discourage himself, but to avoid being emotionally surprised. When the mind expects the storm does not break it. And when impulses, vices, or emotions arise, the response has already been chosen. That prior clarity is the essence of self-control. Deciding in advance is not rigidity, it is wisdom. It means understanding that your calm self must make the decisions your impulsive self will later execute. It means knowing that to live with self-control, you cannot depend on the strength of the moment, but on the strategy crafted beforehand. By writing your personal rules while calm, you create a map your mind can follow when emotion tries to pull you off course. It is an act of inner leadership, your wiser self guiding your more vulnerable one. Consider a concrete example. If you decide to train at 7 a.m. every day, the decision is not made at 6:59 while you're wrapped in bedsheets. It is made the night before. If you decide not to respond to messages while irritated, the decision is not made when your screen lights up. It is made earlier, when you set your emotional standard. If you decide to eat mindfully, the decision is not made when temptation is in front of you. It is made at the start of the day, when you reaffirm your conduct. Those who decide early lead. Those who decide during the moment give in. Most people lose this battle because they want to rely on willpower in critical moments. But willpower is fragile when untrained. It is volatile when you are tired. It is weak when you are sad. It disappears when you are anxious. Depending on it is like trying to build a house in the middle of an earthquake. The Stoic knows this. That is why he decides beforehand. That is why he writes his principles. That is why he establishes personal rules. He understands that without inner structure, emotion will take control. Here is something essential. When you decide in advance, you dramatically reduce mental fatigue. You no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer debate with your excuses. You no longer ask whether you should or shouldn't act a certain way. You already decided. The internal war ends. And when internal war ends, internal freedom begins. Because real slavery is not impulse. It is the endless debate you maintain with it. Deciding in advance ends that war. But to do this, you must first clarify who you want to be. This is not only about defining what you will do, but about defining the identity from which you will act. If your identity is weak, your decisions will be weak. If your identity is confused, your rules will be fragile. Self-control begins with telling yourself, with complete honesty, "This is the kind of person I am, and therefore this will be my response every time this challenge appears." That coherence is the true muscle of character. Life is full of situations where impulse tries to steal the wheel. Arguments that invite you to lose your temper. Temptations pulling you toward excess. Intense emotions trying to drag you away. Old habits trying to regain control. Without prior rules, you fall into old patterns. With prior rules, you create a new path. Every time you obey a pre-made decision, you strengthen the part of you that once was weak, your ability to direct your own behavior. The key is understanding this. Deciding ahead of time does not eliminate the challenge. It eliminates the doubt. And when doubt disappears, impulse loses much of its power. The impulsive mind feeds on chaos, indecision, and emotional improvisation. When you remove that fuel, it becomes powerless. That is why this step is transformative. It turns your life into a conscious act rather than a collection of automatic reactions. Now imagine something with complete clarity. Imagine living an entire week where all your difficult decisions were already made. Imagine waking up without debating it. Imagine eating without negotiating with yourself. Imagine responding calmly because you already chose calm. Imagine not falling into old patterns because you already wrote a new one. The energy you would save would be enormous. The clarity would be unfamiliar. The strength you'd feel would be new. Most importantly, you would begin to trust yourself in a way you thought impossible. Because here lies one of the greatest gifts of this step. When you follow through on your advanced decisions, you rebuild trust in your own word. And trust in your word is the core of self-control. You cannot govern yourself if you don't believe yourself. You cannot transform your life if you have repeatedly shown yourself that your promises are optional. But every time you honor a decision made in advance, a part of you rebuilds. A part of you strengthens. A part of you says, "I am returning." Deciding in advance means ambushing your inner enemy, striking before impulse strikes, raising the shield before the attack, turning on the light before entering the dark room. It means choosing your behavior when you are wise, so that you can sustain it when you feel weak. That is what makes this one of the most powerful tools of Stoic self-control. Because in the end, life does not demand perfection. It demands intention. And intention only exists when you are the one deciding, before emotion decides for you. 7th Stoic step. Don't negotiate with your inner word. There is a silent battle almost no one sees, yet it completely defines the strength or fragility of your character. It doesn't happen in public. It doesn't happen when you speak to others. It doesn't happen when you give explanations or justify yourself to anyone. It happens in a place far more intimate, far more decisive, far more brutal. The conversation you have with yourself. That inner voice that promises discipline, commitment, new directions, better habits, and that you often break the moment the first obstacle appears. The first discomfort shows up, the first wave of fatigue hits, or the first temptation whispers. This step is one of the most important because it strikes at the root of self-control, your relationship with your own word. For the Stoics, breaking your inner word was the same as breaking your authority over yourself. It's as if a part of you stood up and said, "What you promised doesn't matter. And when that happens, though no one else notices, something inside you weakens. Every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," and you don't, you hear it. Every time you say, "Just today, I'll give in," and you do, you hear it. Every time you say, "I won't do that again," and then you repeat it, you hear it. You're not negotiating with anyone else. You're negotiating with yourself. And in that negotiation, you always win something immediate, but lose something priceless: your self-respect. Those who negotiate with their inner word live trapped in a cycle that destroys self-esteem from the inside, not because they fail, but because they become accustomed to failing themselves. That habit is the true wound. The mind learns, and it learns fast. If you hear yourself breaking your promises often enough, your mind stops taking you seriously. And when your mind stops taking you seriously, you no longer have self-control. Because self-control is born when your word has weight, not in front of others, in front of you. That's why this step demands something uncomfortable but liberating, turning your inner word into an unbreakable pact, as if you were signing a contract with yourself, as if you were saying, "What I decide in calm will be law for me in chaos." And you keep it not out of ego, not out of fear, not to impress anyone, but for a deeper reason, because you want inner authority, because you want to trust yourself when life tests you. Imagine what happens when your word becomes law. Your mind begins to behave differently. Excuses weaken. Impulse loses force. Temptation loses leverage. Why? Because there is no more debate, no more negotiation, no more draining inner dialogue. If you decided it, you do it. If you promised it, you honor it, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when the day is heavy, even when your mood betrays you, even when no one sees. That silent discipline shapes you in a way nothing external ever could. The Stoics understood that identity is built from the inside out. You are what you repeatedly do, yes, but you are also what you consistently honor within yourself. When you don't keep your inner word, you create a fracture. What you say and what you do stop matching, and that fracture breeds self-deception, disorder, and mental noise. When you do keep your inner word, you create powerful alignment. Your words, your thoughts, and your actions move in the same direction. That coherence gives you a strength no one can imitate or buy. Think of the most disciplined people you know: athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, philosophers, teachers. They all share the same essential trait. They do not negotiate with themselves. They don't make internal deals to avoid discomfort. They don't invent reasons to fail themselves. They don't look for excuses to justify breaking what they committed to. They choose, they decide, they execute, even when they don't want to, especially when they don't want to. Because every act of discipline reinforces a message: I can trust myself. And that is what this step truly builds: inner trust. A trust so strong you can lean on it in moments of crisis. A trust so deep you can make hard decisions without fear. A trust so grounded that you don't need to prove anything to anyone because you know who you are. Self-control is not a war against impulse. It is a declaration of identity. And that identity is formed through small, daily victories over inner negotiation. But here's a key detail. You cannot keep your inner word if your promises are unrealistic. Over-promising is another form of self-deception. Don't claim you'll change your entire life in a day. Don't claim you'll eliminate every destructive habit overnight. Don't claim you'll become a perfect version of yourself instantly. That's not discipline. That's fantasy. And when fantasy breaks, trust breaks with it. This step does not ask you to make big promises. It asks you to make real ones. Small, clear, concrete, and to keep them without negotiation. because keeping one small promise gives you more strength than breaking a big one. The Stoics did not build character through heroic gestures. They built it through constant, repeated, discreet, almost invisible acts. They repeated virtuous behaviors until they became second nature. So what does it really mean not to negotiate with your inner word? It means that when you say, "I train today," you train, even if only for 10 minutes. When you say, "I won't react with anger," you don't, even if your chest is burning. When you say, "I'll complete this task," you complete it, even when fatigue begs you to leave it for tomorrow. It means becoming someone who honors what they say, even when the world offers 1,000 reasons not to. Each time you keep your inner word, you reclaim territory, you reclaim strength, you reclaim clarity. But each time you break it, you hand territory over to the inner enemy. You give it power, you give it arguments, you give it authority, and that enemy is patient. It waits for your moments of weakness to whisper, "You've never been disciplined." You always fall back into the same patterns. You don't have willpower. That voice doesn't appear when you're strong. It appears when you betray yourself. That is why this step is an act of defense, a shield, a spiritual protection against self-betrayal. Not negotiating with your inner word means treating your life with a loving seriousness. Not rigid or harsh, but respectful. Because if you don't take yourself seriously, no one else will. If you don't respect your decisions, your mind won't either. If you don't show coherence to yourself, you will not be able to demand coherence from the world. Here is the most transformative part. When you stop negotiating with yourself, you eliminate guilt. Guilt doesn't appear when you fail. Guilt appears when you fail at something you promised without conviction. When you decide clearly and you honor it, guilt dissolves. What remains is peace. Even when the process is slow, even when you stumble, even when progress feels uneven, self-control is a journey, yes, but it becomes a steady one when your inner word becomes firm. This step is the bridge between intention and identity, between who you want to be and what you're willing to do to become that person, between the life you imagine and the life you actually build. And that bridge only stands when your inner word is heavy enough not to be debated. Because ultimately, the question is simple. Does your inner word govern you? Or do you break it the moment it becomes uncomfortable? He who masters his word masters his life. He who betrays himself in small things loses himself in great ones. And he who stops negotiating with himself unlocks a power that was trapped for years in pointless internal arguments. The battle for self-control is fought here, in the ability to tell yourself something and obey it, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but because you know your peace, your strength, your clarity, and your destiny depend on it. 8th Stoic step: learn to say no without justifying yourself. There is a quiet skill that, once developed, transforms your life faster than any physical habit, productivity, method, or discipline exercise. It isn't flashy. It isn't socially celebrated. In fact, it is the opposite. It is uncomfortable, confrontational, and reveals inner truths most people spend years trying to avoid. That skill is saying no without feeling guilty, without explaining yourself, without dressing up the rejection, and without apologizing for protecting your energy. For the Stoics, this was an essential form of self-control, not just mastery of your internal impulses, but mastery over what and whom you allow into your life. Saying no sounds simple, but it isn't. Most of the time, when you say yes, you don't say it out of desire, you say it out of fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being judged, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of losing approval, fear that someone will think you're not a good person. That fear is a prison. And it's a prison you willingly walk into every time you accept something you don't want, don't need, or that quietly destroys you from within. Here is the real danger. Every time you say yes when you should say no, your self-control weakens because you are handing your will over to someone else's agenda, desires, or chaos. Self-control is not only about mastering your emotions and impulses, it is also about mastering the external boundaries that other people try to cross. If you don't define your limits, others will define them for you. If you don't protect your time, others will consume it. If you don't defend your energy, others will drain it. And if you don't say no with clarity, the world assumes your silence means yes. This is one of the greatest mistakes humans make, believing that silence is neutral. Silence is not neutral. Silence is interpreted as consent by those who benefit from your lack of boundaries. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that virtue was not about pleasing everyone, but about being faithful to your principles. Marcus Aurelius did not live to satisfy the masses. He lived to obey his conscience. Seneca did not shape his life to please his contemporaries. He shaped it to protect his character. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop living according to the expectations of others. And that is the heart of this step. Saying no is not rejection. It is freedom. It is autonomy. It is the declaration that your life belongs to you. It is the affirmation that your time and inner peace are treasures too valuable to negotiate with those who do not know how to care for them. But this step goes even deeper. It is not only about learning to say no, but learning to say no without justifying yourself. Justifying weakens you. When you over-explain, you are asking for permission to protect your own well-being. You are signaling that your decision needs external validation, and that makes your no lose its power. Justification is a subtle form of still saying yes. That is why the Stoic does not explain his limits, he simply holds them. Think of a recent moment when you said yes, but wanted to say no. Maybe you accepted an invitation that drained you. Maybe you agreed to a favor that cost you energy and time you didn't have. Maybe you tolerated a conversation you didn't want to be in. Maybe you allowed someone into your space who did not respect your limits. Maybe you said yes out of habit, fear of conflict, or the desire to avoid discomfort. Remember how you felt afterward: tired, misaligned, guilty toward yourself. Your body and mind always know when you betray your inner truth. And that internal betrayal carries a silent cost: the slow erosion of the feeling that you are in control of your own life. Saying no without justifying yourself is an act of fidelity to your own integrity. It is proof that you do not need anyone's approval to protect your peace. It is proof that your criteria are enough, that your time is meaningful, that your energy is sacred. It is a small act, but a profound one. And like every Stoic act, it is not dramatic, it is clear. No is a short, clean, direct word. It does not need excuses. It does not need apologies. It does not need a long story. I can't. I don't want to. That doesn't work for me. That's not a priority. I'm not available. There is no arrogance in those sentences. There is clarity. And clarity is respect. Much of social anxiety comes from the inability to say no. People live carrying commitments they don't want, maintaining relationships that drain them, accepting conversations that do not interest them, tolerating behaviors that harm them. When the soul feels forced to live someone else's life, it suffocates. Anxiety is often not an illness, it is a warning, a signal that your life has moved too far from your real boundaries. The Stoics knew that saying no strengthens character because it redefines your position in the world. You stop being a servant to other people's desires. You stop living under the shadow of pleasing everyone. You stop justifying your existence through obedience. and you begin living with integrity. External self-control, saying no to others, strengthens internal self-control, saying no to destructive impulses. They are two sides of the same coin. When you protect your external space, your mind learns to protect its internal space as well. But this step also requires accepting a deeper truth. Some people will walk away when you begin to say no, and that is good. Those who walk away because of your boundaries were never interested in you. They were interested in what they could take from you. No is a natural filter. It reveals who respects you and who uses you, who values you and who demands from you, who walks beside you and who weighs on you. No does not destroy real relationships. No only destroys relationships that should have ended long ago. Saying no without justifying yourself also frees you from the obligation to reveal your inner world. No one has the right to access your deepest reasons. No one has the right to force you to explain your priorities. No one has the right to demand that you expose your soul just to defend a simple decision. Your reasons belong to you. Your boundaries belong to you. Your energy belongs to you. Stopping the habit of justifying yourself is remembering this truth every day. Practice this. Begin by saying no to small things. Decline an invitation you don't want. End a conversation that drains you. Silence a notification that steals your attention. Say no to a commitment that you usually accept out of guilt or habit. And after you say no, notice what happens inside you. At first, you will feel discomfort. The mind will search for excuses it has been trained to please. But if you hold your no, eventually you will feel something stronger, freedom. Self-control grows each time you hear yourself say no and believe it. Because when you say no to others, you are saying yes to yourself, yes to your time, yes to your peace, yes to your priorities, yes to your life. And that yes is what builds a stoic character. You cannot master your life if you cannot stop the external world from invading it. You cannot discipline your mind if you allow others to dictate your time. You cannot be sovereign over yourself if you cannot close the door when it needs to be closed. No is not a wall that isolates you. It is a wall that protects you. It is the frontier that defines who you are and who you will not allow to harm you. It is the simplest yet most powerful tool of social and emotional self-control. Saying no is an act of dignity. Not justifying it is an act of power. Sustaining it is an act of freedom. 9th Stoic step. Observe the consequences of giving in. Every time you give in to an impulse, your mind records the event with brutal precision. It doesn't matter if it was a small impulse, a moment of weakness no one saw, a seemingly insignificant choice that you justified by telling yourself, "This time doesn't matter." It matters. It always matters. Because your mind is the most faithful archive that exists, and it stores every surrender as evidence of what you are willing to tolerate. Self-control is not destroyed by great failures. It is eroded by small concessions, the ones you make without noticing, the ones you allow because you convinced yourself they have no consequences. But they do. And today, I want you to walk with me into that inner space where every one of your decisions has left a trace. I want you to observe, without judgment, what has happened inside you every time you gave in, because there lies a truth that can change everything. Think of a moment when you broke a promise to yourself. Maybe you said that today you would train, that today you would go to bed early, that today you would work with focus, that today you would say no instead of fine, but you didn't. And even though no one pointed at you, even though no one shamed you, even though the world carried on unchanged, something inside you shifted slightly, like a rope losing tension. That tiny internal shift is the cost of giving in, because every time you say, "It doesn't matter," your mind learns exactly that it doesn't matter, that your words are not law, that your boundaries are negotiable, that your intention is just a desire without structure. And the danger is not the action itself, it is the precedent it creates. Now think of another scene, a moment when you gave in to an emotional impulse. Perhaps you reacted with anger, with anxiety, with a message sent too quickly, with an impulsive purchase, with a comment you knew you shouldn't say, with a behavior you let slip even though you knew it wasn't your best self. When you gave in, something felt good for an instant, just enough for your mind to think it was worth repeating. But as soon as that instant passed, the emotional hangover arrived. Guilt, remorse, the sense of having failed yourself, the frustration of falling into the same pattern again. That is the real consequence of giving in. Temporary relief always becomes lasting weight. Now imagine the opposite. Remember a moment, maybe just one, when you did not give in, when you held your ground, even though you were tempted to let go. Maybe you were tired. Maybe your mind whispered that it wasn't worth it, that you could do it tomorrow, that no one would notice if you failed, that you were overreacting. But you didn't give in. You stayed firm. Do you remember the feeling that came afterward? It wasn't euphoria. It was a solid calm, a clarity settling inside you as if your soul had reclaimed lost territory. That is the difference between surrendering and resisting. One takes something from you, the other returns something to you. Self-control is not measured by your big decisions, but by these invisible battles, those moments that seem insignificant and yet are shaping your character every day. Because every time you give in, your mind gets used to your desires being in charge, not your reason. But every time you resist, even a little, even for 1 minute, even by just delaying the action, your mind learns that there is an internal authority stronger than the impulse, and that authority is you. Look at your recent days as if they were a map. Mark the moments in which you gave in. When you ate without hunger, when you opened your phone without intention, when you procrastinated, when you talked too much, when you accepted something you knew you should reject. When you let impulse guide your behavior. These markers on the map are not failures, they are data. Data that reveals where the enemy infiltrates, where you lose strength, where your mind convinces you with the illusion that nothing happens. But something always happens. Because giving in is not just a setback, it is something deeper. You send a message to your identity. Identity is not built with motivational words, it is built with repeated decisions. When you give in, you reinforce the identity of someone without dominion, someone who doesn't keep their promises, someone who reacts instead of choosing. But when you resist even the smallest resistance, you reinforce the identity of the inner warrior, the one who knows impulse does not define action. That is the true training ground of self-control, identity. Observe also how you feel after giving in. There is always a pattern. First comes relief. The mind feels freed from effort. Then comes guilt, a subtle or sharp sense of internal betrayal. Then resignation. You tell yourself tomorrow will be different, that you can improve later, that this time doesn't count. And finally, repetition. Because the impulse always returns stronger when it knows it can win. This cycle is predictable. This cycle is trainable. And breaking it begins by seeing what every surrender really produces, not by justifying it. Next time you are about to give in, do something simple but powerful. Look ahead. Imagine for a few seconds who you will be after giving in and who you will be after resisting. Do not focus on the action, focus on the consequence. Giving in will give you pleasure. Resisting will give you power. Giving in will give you relief. Resisting will give you identity. Giving in will give you comfort. Resisting will give you self-respect. And you know this. You have always known it. You simply need to remember it at the exact moment your mind invites you to switch off your awareness. The Stoic does not judge himself for falling, but he also does not lie to himself. He knows that every choice creates direction, and that is why he observes clearly and coldly what happens when he gives in. Because seeing the truth is half of self-control. The other half is acting accordingly. Understand this with absolute clarity. You are not fighting against your impulses, you are fighting for your identity. Every time you give in, you feed a version of yourself you no longer wish to sustain. Every time you resist, even in the smallest way, you get closer to the person you know you can be. And this person is not perfect, not invulnerable, not emotionless. It is someone who governs themselves, someone who chooses with a clear mind even when their body trembles, someone who knows that true power is not eliminating desire, but refusing to obey it blindly. Observe the result of giving in. Observe it without filter, without softening it, without justifying it. Then ask yourself, with brutal honesty, is it worth giving away my life, my time, my strength, and my character for an impulse that lasts seconds? If the answer is no, and it is, then you have already won half the battle. The other half begins now. In every moment, you choose not to give in. 10th Stoic step. Train the pause as a daily habit. There is a silent force that separates those who govern themselves from those who are dragged by their impulses. It is not a special talent, nor a gift reserved for a few. It is a simple pause. A tiny instant between what you feel and what you do. A space so small that most people never notice it, yet so powerful that it can completely change the direction of your life. Today, I want to take you into that space, into that mysterious ground where true self-control is born, one that does not depend on motivation or energy or desire, but on the ability to stop yourself before you act. And if you manage to cultivate this pause, even for a second, you will have taken one of the most profound steps on your Stoic path. Think of the last time you acted without thinking. Maybe you sent an impulsive message you later regretted. Maybe you ate something you knew you didn't need. Maybe you spoke harshly, reacted with anger, gave in to fear, procrastinated, said yes when you wanted to say no, or surrendered to a distraction that only tried to cover a void you didn't want to face. Each one of those actions was born without a pause. It happened because you let emotion move faster than reason. The mind wanted space, but you did not give it. And in that moment, you lost the inner battle. Now think of a moment, even if only one, in which you did stop. You breathed before responding. You waited a second before opening your mouth. You decided not to react, not to answer, not to give in. Do you remember the feeling that followed? It wasn't a fleeting relief like the one that comes from indulging an impulse. It was a feeling of command, of order, of clarity, as if a light had turned on inside you. That light is the pause, and that pause is the beginning of freedom. I want you to imagine your mind as a river. Most people let themselves be carried away by the emotional current, unaware that they are being moved by automatic impulses they do not control. But the Stoic learns to place a rock in the middle of the river, a rock that interrupts the current, forcing the water to flow around it, to slow down, to change its shape. That rock is the pause. That rock is you. And when you place it, the water stops dominating everything. You decide where it flows. The pause is not borrowed from the universe. It is trained. It is built through repetition. It is strengthened through present attention. And it becomes more powerful when you practice it in small situations, not big ones. Because when the emotional storm hits, when you are tired, irritated, stressed, or caught off guard, you will not have the strength to improvise self-control. In those moments, the only thing that will sustain you is what you have repeated hundreds of times in calm. That is why the Stoic practices the pause daily. When responding to a message, when about to open social media, when eating, when spending, when reacting, when speaking. In each of those situations, the pause is a reminder of who is truly in control. The pause also reveals something most people do not want to see, that most of your impulses are not real needs, but automatic habits. If you wait a few seconds, the impulse weakens. What felt urgent becomes manageable. What felt inevitable becomes optional. The pause shows you that desire is a wave, not a command, and every wave, no matter how intense, loses power if you do not feed it. I want you to notice what happens inside you when you introduce a pause. First comes discomfort. Your mind tells you to act now, respond now, eat now, pay now, break the silence now, because your mind is used to reacting, not deciding. Then comes a small emptiness, that strange space where you don't know what to do. That emptiness is precisely freedom. And then, if you stand firm, clarity appears. You see the situation from above. You see your emotion without becoming it. You see reality without dramatizing it. This process may last 3 seconds or 30, it doesn't matter. What matters is that in that space, you are choosing, not obeying. Training the pause also means training your internal authority. It means proving to yourself that you can hold an emotion without letting it govern you. It means you can feel anger without hurting, anxiety without fleeing, sadness without giving up, desire without losing yourself. The pause does not suppress emotions, it orders them. It shows you that you can contain them without being broken. It shows you that you are larger than your impulses. It shows you that you have an inner space you will never access if you live reacting automatically. The pause allows you to see the truth hidden behind the impulse. It lets you ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to compensate for? What part of me seeks escape instead of strength? Sometimes the impulse comes from exhaustion, sometimes from fear, sometimes from insecurity, sometimes from habit. The pause gives you time to understand it, because you cannot govern what you do not understand. In a world obsessed with speed, the pause is a revolutionary act. It is the deepest form of rebellion against a life guided by automatisms. It says, I will not accelerate just because everyone else does. It is choosing depth over haste, consciousness over noise, character over convenience. And even if no one sees it, even if no one applauds, you will feel the difference. Because every pause you make is a victory over the part of you that used to make decisions for you. The pause also has a multiplying effect. It gives you time to remember who you want to be. When you never stop, you act from who you are, in that moment tired, irritated, distracted, impulsive. But when you introduce a pause, you regain access to your higher identity, the one that makes decisions from reason and not from temporary emotion. That is where self-control stops feeling like a struggle and becomes a natural expression of character. I want you to understand this with absolute clarity. The pause does not weaken you, it strengthens you. It does not delay your life, it organizes it. It does not make you lose opportunities. It saves you from mistakes. It is not a passive act, it is an active, conscious, deliberate one. It is the bridge between impulse and decision. And that bridge, if you cross it every day, will become part of you. It will be your refuge in chaotic moments. It will be your shield when emotion pushes you to the edge. It will be your most powerful tool for building a character capable of facing any circumstance. Starting today, I want you to practice the pause as if it were a sacred ritual. Before responding, pause. Before buying, pause. Before arguing, pause. Before opening your mouth, pause. Before surrendering to an impulse, pause. Even if it's 1 second, even half a second, even a breath. Each of those pauses is another brick in the inner fortress you are building. Because in the end, the pause is not just a habit. It is a declaration. A silent but firm declaration that you will no longer be governed by impulses that last minutes and leave consequences that last years. A declaration that your life will not be a chain of automatic reactions, but a sequence of conscious decisions. A declaration that you are ready to master what once mastered you. Train the pause, repeat the pause, honor the pause. It is there, in that sacred second, where true self-control begins. 11th Stoic step. Remember who you want to be, not what you want now. There is a silent, almost imperceptible moment in which your entire life can change. A moment in which your mind asks a question that most people never dare to confront. Am I acting like the person I want to become, or like the one I am when I let myself be dragged by my impulses? That moment is a mirror, and what you see in it may scare you, or it may wake you up. But if you have the courage to look at it directly, you will discover a truth that completely transforms your relationship with yourself. Your self-control does not depend on what you want today, but on the identity you choose to build over time. Desire always speaks in the present. It tells you, now, right away. Do it, take it, fall, give in. It does not think about tomorrow. It does not think about consequences. It does not think about who you are or who you can become. Desire is a loud visitor. It arrives without warning, demands, pushes, pressures, and disappears the moment you feed it. But identity, that higher version of yourself, is quiet, constant, patient. It does not shout. It reminds, it calls, it invites you to a higher standard. And every time you choose to act from that identity, you build character instead of feeding impulses. I want you to think for a moment about the future version of yourself you want to become. Not a fantasy, not a blurry ideal, but a real figure you can describe clearly. Someone disciplined, with self-mastery, emotional firmness, inner calm, willpower, and purpose. Someone who wakes up each day aware of their decisions, not trapped in their habits. Someone who does not react from impulse, but acts from reason. That version of you is not as far away as you think. It lives in your small decisions, not in your big dreams. It lives in what you do when no one sees you, not in what you promise when everyone listens. Every time you face a temptation, whether it is food, distraction, laziness, anger, anxiety, shopping, ego, the need for approval, or any other form of inner weakness, that temptation is asking you something profound. Do you want to satisfy what you want now, or do you want to honor who you want to be? And that is where this Stoic step comes in, because self-control is not a fight against desire. It is an agreement with your identity. If you remember who you want to be, desire loses power. If you forget who you want to be, desire takes the lead. The Stoic knows that desire is changeable, capricious, volatile, but identity is stable. And that is why the wise never made decisions from momentary emotion. They made them from their principles, from the highest vision they held of themselves, from what they wanted to build over time, because they understood something most people never grasp. What you want now can destroy what you want for your entire life. Let me take you to an example. Imagine you want to become a disciplined person. You feel it, you want it, you say it, you write it, you repeat it. But morning comes, the alarm rings, and your immediate desire is to stay in bed. That desire says nothing about you. It is natural. What does say something is how you respond to it. If you decide from the present, you choose the bed. If you decide from your future identity, you choose to get up. The action you choose is a vote. And every day, with every vote, you are choosing who you will become. There is no neutrality, Every decision feeds one of your two selves. Or think of someone who wants to be emotionally strong. This person says, "I don't want to react with anger. I don't want to enter pointless arguments. I want to stay calm." But then conflict arrives. A comment arrives. An attack arrives. A provocation arrives. In that moment, your immediate desire is to defend yourself, react, respond, attack. But your ideal self, the one you want to build, calls quietly from within. Does this bring you closer to or farther from who you want to be? If you choose the reaction, you strengthen the impulsive self. If you choose calm, you strengthen the conscious self. Every difficult situation is silent training. Self-control becomes clearer when you understand that you are not fighting desire, you are choosing between identities. Who you are today is the accumulated result of your past decisions. Who you will be tomorrow is the accumulated result of your decisions today. Nothing changes without a commitment to the identity you want to embody. So, ask yourself, which version of me do I want to feed? The version that seeks immediate relief, or the version that builds self-respect? There is something even deeper. Remembering who you want to be not only helps you avoid mistakes, it also gives you direction in moments of uncertainty. When you don't know what to do, ask yourself, what would the version of me that I admire do? And that question, simple but powerful, will give you a direction. Because that future version is not imaginary, it is the manifestation of your potential. When you act like that version, even for a moment, you are already becoming it. Desire without control is slavery, but chosen identity is freedom, and you decide which one holds the reins. If you are tired of repeating patterns, tired of self-sabotage, tired of falling into the same traps, you do not need more willpower. You need clarity. The clarity of knowing who you want to be, and remembering it every day, every hour, every time an impulse appears. This Stoic step asks you for something simple yet profound. Before you act, remember. Remember your vision. Remember your standard. Remember your goal. Remember your commitment to yourself. Remember the dignity of your path, because desire speaks loudly, but your purpose speaks more deeply. I want you to imagine yourself facing two invisible doors that open every time you face a temptation. One door says, "What I want now." The other says, "Who I want to become." You walk through one or the other. You cannot walk through both. There is no mix, no confusion. Each door leads to a different destiny, and the constant repetition of the same door ends up defining your entire life. This step does not ask for perfection. It asks for memory. It asks you to return to yourself. It asks you to choose from identity, not from impulse. And with time, that identity stops feeling distant and starts feeling natural. One day, you will realize that you have chosen from your better self so often that you became that self without noticing. Because in the end, developing self-control is developing identity. And identity is not born from desires, it is born from decisions. When you remember who you want to be, even when it hurts, even when it is hard, even when giving up feels easier, you forge something no one can take from you. Self-respect, inner strength, coherence, authentic power. And a day will come sooner than you think when you stand before an impulse and you no longer make a heroic effort to resist it. It simply won't be your path, because you will have replaced "I want this now" with "I am not that person." That is the moment when self-control stops feeling like a struggle and becomes your nature. Remember who you want to be. Remember it today. Remember it tomorrow. Remember it when you are tired. Remember it when you are tempted. Remember it when no one sees you. There begins the transformation. There begins the inner victory. There begins true self-control. 12th Stoic step. Accept that you will fail, but never abandon the practice. There is a truth almost no one wants to hear, yet it is the cornerstone of self-control. You are going to fail. Not once, not twice, not 10 times. You will fail many times on your path to becoming someone stronger, calmer, and more in command of yourself. And yet, there is nothing more powerful than accepting that truth without giving up. Because while most people stop at the first stumble, the Stoic understands that failure is not the end of the path. It is part of the training. Think about all the times you tried to change something in your life. You started with strength, motivation, clarity. This time for real, you told yourself. This time it will be different. And it was, for hours, days, maybe weeks. Then a moment came. It always comes when your mind grew tired, when the impulse returned, disguised as justification, when emotion overpowered reason. You gave in, you fell. And then a poisonous thought appeared. See, I can't do this. I'm not cut out for it. I always go back. That thought is not the truth. It is a trap, a shadow disguised as logic, a lie many accept as fate. And that is why they never advance. The Stoic, however, rises again and again, because he understands something essential. Growth does not happen in a straight line. It happens in a spiral. You return to the same point, yes, but you return higher, more aware, more prepared. Failure does not send you back to the beginning. It returns you to a different place, one where you understand more about yourself and about the inner war you are fighting. Every fall reveals your weak point, and knowing your weak point is the only way to strengthen it. If you quit when you fail, you will never learn to resist. If you keep trying, even when it hurts, even when it embarrasses you, even when it frustrates you, you are building something those who never try will never know. Resilience, persistence, character. That solid character that one day, without noticing, makes you unbreakable before what once dominated you. The greatest mistake of those seeking self-control is believing that failure means going backward, but it does not. Failure means you are on the battlefield, that you are truly confronting what enslaves you, that you are building a freedom that is not theoretical, but real. Failure is only failure when you stay down, drowning in guilt. But if you fail and rise, if you fail and correct, if you fail and continue, then you did not fail. You trained. Seneca said that even the wise man stumbles, but he does not remain on the ground. It is the difference between the one who builds himself and the one who destroys himself. The one who builds knows that every stumble is a lesson. The one who destroys himself turns every stumble into a sentence. Which one do you want to be? Think about this with complete honesty. How many times have you abandoned something you truly wanted, not because it was impossible, but because you failed once or twice and assumed that was proof you couldn't do it? But who told you the first version of yourself was ready to sustain the life you want? Who told you it was wrong to fall while learning to walk? Watch a child learning to take his first steps. He wobbles, falls, cries, gets up, falls again, gets up again. No one looks at him and says, he's not made for walking. On the contrary, every fall is part of progress. But when we grow up, we forget that truth. We demand perfection, and when we don't achieve it, we withdraw. That is the origin of stagnation, the absurd belief that real change must happen without imperfection. Your mind, your discipline, your character work just like that child. They need practice, they need repetition, they need stumbling, they need insistence, they need time. No one develops self-control without failing. No one develops strength without breaking a little. No one develops clarity without passing through confusion. No one develops consistency without fighting against laziness. No one develops mastery without enduring frustration. So when you fail, because you will do not ask yourself, "Why am I like this?" Ask yourself, "How do I rise better this time?" That question puts you in learning mode. It moves you forward. It reminds you that you are not seeking perfection, you are seeking progress. That you are not fighting to be flawless, you are fighting to be aware. And that alone is already heroic. See each failure as a detailed report your own mind is giving you. It tells you where you lack strength, where you lost focus, where you let emotions take over, where your environment sabotages you, where your old habits are still alive. Not to judge you, but so you can adjust your internal strategy. Nothing strengthens without resistance, and your self-control needs resistance to grow. The Stoic never defines himself by a slip. He defines himself by his return, by his ability to get back on the path, by his commitment to practice, because that is the key. Self-control is not an achievement, it is a practice. A daily, humble, persistent practice. You continue even when you feel weak, even when you feel unworthy, even when you wonder if it is worth it, because it is worth it. And you will know it the day you stand before a temptation that once dragged you without effort, and discover it no longer has power over you. This transformation does not come in one great moment. It arrives quietly, accumulated in every one of your small victories, in every time you tried again after failing, because you will fail 100 times. But you only need one time in which you do not fail to change everything. And that time does not arrive by luck. It arrives by persistence. Remember something profound. Most people quit, not because they cannot, but because they believe they should not fail so much. But you are playing the long game. You are sculpting character. You are forging an identity that does not break with a stumble. So, let me tell you clearly. If you failed today, try again tomorrow. If you fail tomorrow, try again the next day. If you fail 10 times, rise 11. Not because you are indestructible, but because you are becoming so. Self-control is not a straight line upward. It is an emotional electrocardiogram. It rises and falls. It advances and retreats. But as long as you remain alive in the attempt, as long as you make decisions from awareness and not from guilt, as long as you keep walking even slowly, you are still progressing. And I guarantee something. A moment will come when you no longer recognize yourself. You will see yourself acting with a calm you never had, with a strength you never imagined, with a stability that once seemed impossible. And you will know that it was not because of your moments of perfection, but because of your ability to continue even when you were broken. This 12th step is not permission to give up. It is permission to move forward with humanity. The Stoics were not unshakable machines. They were humans, just like you, trying to be better than yesterday. They did not seek perfection, they sought virtue. And virtue is built through daily practice, not through flawlessness. So listen carefully, because this is the heart of self-control. Failing does not take you off the path. Giving up does. Every day you decide to try again. Even if you feel you're going backward, you are strengthening yourself inside. Every day you return to the practice, even clumsily, you are training. Every day you choose to continue, even in shame, you are proving something monumental, that your commitment to yourself is greater than your mistakes. And when you understand this, when you truly embrace it, failure stops frightening you. It becomes part of the process. And you keep advancing, and you keep growing, and you keep mastering your mind. And you keep winning an inner war millions lose because they never dared to continue after failing. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be consistent. And that consistency, day after day, is what will turn you into someone who is no longer ruled by impulses, but by purpose. This is the final step, the most honest acceptance, the hardest practice, the deepest victory. It does not matter how many times you fall. What matters, the only thing that matters, is that you never abandon the practice. Because as long as you are willing to rise, your transformation will continue. And one day, without noticing, you will have become someone who never surrenders to himself. Before closing this session, I want you to do something different. Make a commitment to yourself in silence, without writing it, without showing it, without announcing it. Just say it internally. Starting today, I reclaim control over myself, not outwardly, inwardly, because self-control is not proven to the world. It's proven when no one is watching. Everything you heard today is not meant to inspire you for a moment. It's meant to awaken you forever. Each of these steps is a tool, but they only work if you choose to use them. And if something inside you shifted while you listened, if you felt that, finally, you understood why your impulses had gained so much ground, then follow that calling. Subscribing is not a favor to this podcast. It's an internal declaration that you choose to train your mind instead of letting it drift. It means you refuse to live on autopilot, that you're willing to think with more clarity and live with more intention. Share this only if you know someone truly needs it, because when a person learns to govern themselves from within, their entire environment changes with them. And now listen to this with sincerity toward yourself. Your life is not going to transform because you listen to these words. It will transform because you apply them. Not tomorrow, not on January 1st. Today, self-control is not a gift. It is a practice. It is a way of life. It is a silent promise you make to yourself every time you choose to wait, choose to decide, choose to breathe, choose to think, and act from reason, not impulse. And if tomorrow you fail, don't return to that old idea that you're not cut out for this. Failing is part of the training. Trying again is part of mastery. Every day you choose to get up and practice again. Your mind learns that it no longer rules, you do. This is only the beginning. The real battle starts when this audio ends and the world pushes you back toward what you've always done. There, at that exact moment where you used to give in, is where you'll begin to notice your transformation. You decide. And what you decide today will build who you are tomorrow. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.